That's very kind. Thank you very much.
I regard the hypothesis of the existence of God as a scientific hypothesis. And in this I disagree with many of my scientific colleagues who feel that science and religion have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and you can be a perfectly good scientist while your religious belief is a purely private matter that has nothing whatever to do with your